morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of AI UK 2022. This is the In the Lab stage. I hope you've got your morning brew, whether that's a coffee or a tea, or if you're in a different time zone, maybe you've got something a little bit more tasty if it's later on in the day. If this is your first time attending AI UK, let me just reintroduce it for anyone who wasn't here yesterday. AI UK is the UK's national showcase of artificial intelligence and data science research and collaboration. It's hosted by the Alan Turing Institute, the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science Technologies. Our hope is that this event is going to be informative, helpful, and hopefully also entertaining for everybody who's tuning in, whether you're from the UK AI community or perhaps beyond. My name's Gemma Milne. I'm going to be your host for this stage, the In the Lab stage. I'm a science and technology journalist and broadcaster. I'm a PhD researcher in science technology studies at UCL, and I'm also the author of the book Smoke and Mirrors: How Hype Obscures the Future and How to See Past It. So we're live here in London, Victoria. I hope you're joining us from somewhere comfortable, whether that's your desk seat or perhaps your sofa or something, maybe even bed if it's nice and early for you. Coming up today, we're going to be hearing about lots of different research in action topics. This stage is obviously massively focused on what actually happens in the lab and to the people in that lab itself, how it works in terms of how we do brilliant research. We're going to be looking at research into early detection of diseases, all the way through to AI for media, entertainment and education. We're also going to be exploring foundation models and asking, are they worth the hype? But first, we've got a really interesting panel to kick us off today, and it's going to be all about how to thrive in your PhD. So hopefully we've got lots of people tuning in who are really interested in this topic, whether you're considering a PhD, in the middle of a PhD, or perhaps thinking about going back and doing one as a mature student or something like that. But to kick us off, we're going to have a little presentation and then we're going to go into discussion. So for our presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Andrea Luppi, who's a PhD student at the University of Cambridge with a background in philosophy and cognitive science. Andrea's research aims is to characterise how the capacity for cognition and consciousness arises from the complex interactions between brain systems viewed as a dynamic network. Ultimately, he aims to develop a landscape of altered states of consciousness and a unified theoretical understanding of how consciousness is lost and how we can promote its recovery in patients. Absolutely fascinating. Over to you, Andrea, to kick us off with your presentation.
Thank you. And so the whole point of this session, if you will, is how to thrive in your PhD, which really means how to do good and how to do well as a PhD student. And the point of a PhD is a lofty goal because it's intended to advance human knowledge while also at the same time certifying your credentials as someone who is capable of generating new knowledge. And it's important to realize that there are different kinds of doctorates. Not every doctorate is a PhD, and sometimes a PhD is not the doctor you need. So it's really important for you to realize who you want to be, what kind of doctor you want to be, if at all. And then, once you've made that decision clear in your mind, the real decision begins of which grad school program is going to take you there, and how you can take that program and become the doctor and the person professionally that you want to be. Now, the PhD is based on the apprenticeship model, which means that you work closely with someone who has gone through the same process before, has become an expert in that field, and therefore can teach you the ropes and teach you how to become in turn an expert in that field. But learning the skills is not the only point of this apprenticeship model, because your mentor has to be someone who inspires you, who keeps up your motivation to do the work for the 3, 5, maybe 7 years that it takes to do a PhD. And it's important to realize your mentor is also someone who will need to advocate for you, have your back, and stand up for you when that's called for. So that is perhaps the most important choice that you will have to make as a prospective graduate student. It takes a different kind of mindset to be a PhD student or a research grad student than it takes to be an undergrad or even a taught master's student. When a taught degree, the whole point is figuring out the right answers. And everybody's expected to learn those same answers. The point of a research degree is really about figuring out the right questions. There are so many things that as humans we don't yet know that figuring out the right question can be much more valuable than then figuring out the answer to it. And ultimately, every PhD has to be different. No two people can write the same thesis. So independence is the goal, and everybody's path will be different. Now, on that context, it's important to realize that grad school is a part of your life, and it is all really about balance. You have to learn to balance learning and doing. And a trap that sometimes grad students fall into is trying to learn absolutely everything that there is to know about a field before starting to do any new research. That is a balance that needs to be struck. And likewise, when choosing what topic to research on, you cannot focus just on the highest reward. You have to balance that with how risky it is, but also vice versa. So these are things that need to be balanced themselves. And finally, remember that this is a part of your life. So learn to balance the work with everything else that's going on in your life. And think prospectively about this as you are choosing where and what program to do your PhD or your grad school in. Now, perhaps the most important point of a PhD is failure. Failure is integral to the scientific method. That is how, as humans, we learn. We make mistakes, and science is the process of systematizing the making of mistakes such that everybody else will be able to learn from every mistake that you make. If you make the right kind of mistakes, then the rest of humanity can make better mistakes tomorrow. And that is the point of grad school. And as part of that, you need to make sure that your failures are informative, so that every failure can be a lesson that others and yourself can learn from. So think of grad school as a protected space where you can learn to make mistakes productively. And finally, there are a number of rules that we've put together with some colleagues of mine about what you should consider if you want to be, or are thinking you might want to be, a grad student. And here are just some of the key do's and don'ts. And in particular, I would like to highlight the need for passion to be married with practicality as one of the most important do's. And as one of the most important don'ts, don't feel the need that you have to go to grad school. Only go to grad school if that is what you decide that you need in terms of who you want to be. And finally, of course, it's also important to have fun as being a grad student, because a PhD is a long endeavor, and you won't be able to go through it just by doing the work. So again, see it as a part of your life and try to enjoy it. And of course, there are many people who contributed to everything that I'm telling you, so it's important to acknowledge your collaborations as well as a grad student. That can be one of the most fun parts of being a grad student. Thank you.
Amazing, Andrea. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction to this topic of how to thrive with your PhD. We're now going to move on to a panel discussion. We've got two wonderful people who have also joined us for this. We've got Ingrid Sundvor, who's the CEO of Project Access International, and we've got Sachdev, Head of Coaching at Effective Thesis. Thank you both so much for joining us to kind of add to this discussion. Why don't we kind of build a little bit on what you were talking about there, Andrea? Let's have a discussion about what is it that makes a graduate degree particularly challenging. I mean, you touched on some of the stuff, but let's go a little bit deeper and perhaps pair that with what makes it rewarding as well. But Dev, let's start with you.
What makes a grad school really challenging is that you don't know what you're doing most of the time. And to be okay with not knowing, like Andrea said, to be okay with failure, just to be okay to explore and learn, and to be active about it is what really helps with this. And one of the biggest joys of grad school, like Andrea said as well, is to be able to collaborate, to network, to get to know a lot of other people who are very smart, to be able to grow and learn from them and learn with them. So to be able to work together to achieve some goals, and that's very important. But a key piece of advice that I can tell you is that what makes it really challenging is that over a long period of time, you might lose interest in your project. But what you usually don't lose is the importance of the project. So you have to make sure you can marry that practical aspect or choose a project that is important, that can have a large impact in the world as you go forward. And when you have that as in the back end of your mind while you're working towards a project, that's really helpful, because at some point you might be questioning yourself, and to go past that.
Many points.
Yes.
Many points. Absolutely. Ingrid, I'd love to come to you for this as well.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting. I think Andrea captured a lot of good things, and Dev as well. Now, the one thing I want to touch upon is maybe when you start the journey, you see that many of your fellow PhD students or other postgrad studies as well come from different backgrounds, and you have and sometimes the professors would assume knowledge, and they would assume sort of a status quo of you know what you're doing, and you know also the I guess the field that you have started your PhD or master in. And I think that's a really challenging thing in the beginning, to make it okay and set the expectations that you are just starting out, and that knowledge will transform and be more after a few years. And Dev, I want to just emphasize what you said, collaboration. If someone else is strong on more the technical aspect, then you collaborate with them on that, and you have another perspective. And I think that's been one of the challenges thing that I've heard from my network, being that sort of starting point where you see a lot of assumed knowledge from your professors, I guess.
Yeah, that sort of what is it, imposter syndrome, I think, is very, very obvious when you're a grad student, particularly because you mentioned everybody's doing their own thing, and you're kind of coming in going, oh, what do I even know? They all seem to know even more than me. From your perspective, Andrea, I mean, for you personally, you're obviously a bit further into your PhD now. What has been your most challenging thing, reflecting back in the last couple of years?
I think for me, it's been both the challenge and the reward, and it's been the interdisciplinary aspect. I'm a former philosopher, still a philosopher at heart, and then I moved to psychology, and then I moved to neuroscience, and I'm moving closer to complex system science, and all of them have their own disciplines, and weaving them together in a way that doesn't feel like I'm an imposter, but rather someone who can bring new knowledge and perspectives. I think that's been the challenge. But when that works out, then I think that is the biggest joy that can spark for me from a PhD, is seeing that synergy happen. And it doesn't happen in isolation, of course. It happens with others. And seeing that and making new knowledge that could not have been possible from any of the individual people who are taking part in a project, that is definitely the most rewarding part, I'd say.
Let's build a little bit on this point that you made. I think you made it quite clear in your presentation, but let's go a little bit deeper about what makes a PhD different from another kind of degree. And I guess the reason I think it's nice to build on this a little bit more is I think it's about setting expectations, right? So knowing why a PhD is different than another kind of degree, I think, can really help with what you said about coming in at the early stages and worrying and whatnot about what you know and what you don't know. So maybe you could build a little bit on that for us.
Yeah, so in a taught degree, there is the expectation that someone knows the answers, and you have to figure out what they are, and they're going to tell you, and then you have to memorize them or learn how to get there. In a PhD, it's different, because even when you are the apprentice of one of the world experts on your PhD topics, and if that's not the case, then probably you're not in the right PhD lab. But even in that case, your advisor is not going to know the answers to every question. They might have a strong hypothesis about it, but they don't know for sure, because you're generating new knowledge. And that means that figuring out the question itself can be a problem there. And that's something that often, as an undergrad, you're not really taught how to do. You're taught the what, you're not taught the how. So learning the how of generating new knowledge is one of the very biggest differences that there can be. It's an entirely different kind of mindset, and not everybody makes that switch so easily. And it took myself quite a while to figure out that different in mindset itself, yeah.
I suppose it's that having permission, isn't it, to feel that, I have it for myself when I'm having a meeting with my supervisor and I'm saying, I'm thinking this might be true. And she's like, could be. And I'm like, are you not going to tell me if I'm right or wrong? Like, how does this work? So I think you're right about having that understanding and managing those expectations of yourself instead of going in and being worried about it is really key. Did you want to add something, Dev?
And that's a skill. I think one of the big differences that to a PhD in a taught program is that when you go into a taught program, you are coming out with a set expectation, a set skill. And when you go into a PhD, you don't really feel that. You don't think you're building the skills to maybe move back to industry or academia. But throughout your journey, you're building so many skills that when you reflect upon it, it's a lot more. To be able to like go into the unknown, to become a project manager inherently, to be able to manage such a large-scale project, all of these skills, I don't think it's easy to get that from other degrees.
Yeah. It was actually a topic of discussion. I used to do a lot of work with startups and along with PhD students. And I used to say, actually, in some sense, founders of startups and PhD students have a lot in common, not maybe in terms of their own self-confidence, but I think in terms of skill sets and in terms of, you know, the fact, yeah, you're right, you're a project manager, you're also being a researcher, you also have to go out on a limb and try new things. But I find a lot of the time that PhD students tend to have this more, all I know is my single thing that I've done, when in fact you're right, it's a much broader swathe. Do you want to add anything to this about the difference as well?
No, I think the only thing I can add, which I know has been, is sort of the self-discipline, I guess, which is an element of skill sets, and also probably one of the challenges, going back to the challenge perspective, is that self-discipline nobody is going to, your supervisor is not going to tell you to be there at 8 a.m. You're going to have to be motivated yourself to go in and do the work. So I think the self-discipline is just a skill I could add into the mix.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Well, let's build a little bit on that, because I think your self-discipline is 100% a big part of that. And I think one of the things that I've certainly felt myself is this sort of tension between what you mentioned earlier on, Dev, of you don't have a clue what you're doing most of the time, and that's okay. But at the same time, you have to have self-discipline to do something, but you don't really know what. So I think it's trying to kind of keep your eye on the prize of sorts. So what does that look like? What is it that we should hope to accomplish with our PhD? Is there something specific we should be looking to, or a mindset we should have in terms of that? Dev, do you want to kick us off?
I think what you want to achieve is impact. And when I say impact, I mean it in two ways. So first is an impact into the knowledge or into the world in some way, to achieve something that can have an impact, have a practical impact, but also an impact on yourself. So you have to look within doing this journey, what impact does it have on me? What are my goals coming out of this? And what can I achieve? Whether I'm successful or not is not the point. It's whether I can create that impact in some form. And like you said, like Andrea said earlier, creating a failed impact is still an impact that you can have to learn from that failure. And so creating an impact is really important. I think that's the most important takeaway going in. But the other one is your supervisor. So your supervisor should be someone who can tell like what kind of impact you want to have, what kind of relationship you want to have, and just guide you through that journey in a way that you are okay with that impact. Not that you get overwhelmed, and that's something that happens all the time in a PhD.
I can second that. Andrea, what about yourself? I mean, because I think that for me has certainly been really helpful, is sort of keeping your eye on the prize of sorts, even if it's a bit vague. How do you think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your PhD, and how has that helped, or how can it help people when they're thinking about when we were talking about how to thrive in a PhD, right? So what does that aim look like, and how does that help?
I think for me, I've always been fascinated with the question of how a lump of matter between our ears can make us conscious, it can make us dream, it can bring us here, listening and talking. And that's extremely fascinating to me. And I think the fact that I'm so fascinated with it has been really helpful in keeping my motivation going. And at the same time, there is the fact that it can have practical implications for some people who have had some kind of severe brain injury, and they can be in a disorder of consciousness, in a coma for sometimes decades even. So it's this dual aspect. It's scientifically fascinating, it satisfies my curiosity, but it can also have meaning for people who are suffering, the families of these people are suffering. And I think balancing those two has been helpful. That's been the prize that I'm keeping my eyes on. And then there is the part of developing these skills and developing myself as well, and keeping those collaborations going. Because I think it's really good to see the impact, talking about impact, the impact that you have on other people's work around you. If you collaborate, that's one of the good things. You don't just get others' help on your projects. You also get to help others. And I'm using the word get on purpose because it means that you get to see success and good projects coming out of your work that are led by others, And you get to see, again, that synergy coming up in all sorts of different forms. So even when it's not your own work, it's work that you're doing with someone else, and you see, and you're helping them thrive. And that's good, because thriving yourself often means, in a PhD, making those around you thrive.
I'm just thinking, hearing both of you talk, I was thinking about like realism, you know, because when I think for some people, I mean, everyone has different aims coming into a PhD. Some people will finish their bachelor's or their master's and think the next step is a PhD, and I see it as a sort of apprenticeship to become a scientist or whatever it is. Different people like me who are mature students are going back because it's just out of interest and fancy having a sabbatical to think. But ultimately, I think a big question that I've been thinking a lot about is, what can I realistically expect to get out of my PhD versus what am I actually aiming for as a career as a researcher? Because I think that those are different things. How do you think about managing that realism?
That's a really good question, because realistically, when you're thinking about the long-term prize and the impact, you might also get overwhelmed from this big picture goal. And I get overwhelmed a lot. I'm someone who used to work as a lawyer, so everything is a short-term project, working hours, hourly work all the time. And I've done a career transition into a science PhD, and that's been really interesting. But also for me, it's been too overwhelming a journey to just think, oh, I need to achieve this in 4 years. But rather, I take it yearly. So most PhD programs in the UK now have like a yearly review of how you're doing. I take that as a review for myself. Should I be staying here? Is it still okay for me to be here? If it's not, that's perfectly okay. I've still achieved a certain amount of knowledge that I can take back, still achieved a certain amount of impact in the first 2 years that I can take along with me to another interest of mine, I guess. But that's how I'm realistic about what I do.
I love that. Ingrid, how do you think about it? I mean, obviously you're taking part in mentoring a lot of people, and I'm sure this sort of realism question must come up in the students that you work with.
Yeah, so Project Access does, obviously, we help students, both undergrads, but here today talking about postgrads, to understand which degree is the best for their long-term plan. And we help them through application process, and we have one peer-to-peer mentorship to get them that individual support. I personally think that what we as an organization do and support with is saying that you shouldn't choose a topic or a degree for the purpose that is instrumental for your career afterwards. The workforce or the labor market is getting more and more flexible. The new generation would probably have to change jobs more often. We probably want to change jobs more often. So what we try to mentor people on, and I guess I use this as my own journey in my education as well, is rather choose something you're passionate about, which Andrea mentioned, and then see what opportunities pop up. Because the market of jobs or professional experience is so flexible and so fast moving that suddenly you meet someone who gives you, and you have a conversation, and then you jump on that opportunity and you have a job and you have something you care about, something new you care about that probably connects to what you've always studied or wanted to do, but it's not a planned journey as much. So that's what I want to add to this conversation, that in a PhD and year to year is a good evaluation of doing that, but also keeping an open mindset that you shouldn't choose a topic or a degree to have a clear mindset that equals this type of job, because that's not a certain path.
We're already getting questions through from the audience, so if anyone else has got questions, please do put them on Slido. I'm going to dip in and out of audience questions as we talk, instead of just leaving them to the end, so do submit them. But just building a little bit on what we're talking about here, and I'm going to go to you, Deb, because you mentioned that you used to be a lawyer and are now doing your PhD. Katie asks, is it feasible/common for mid-career professionals in industry to join PhD programs?
Completely.
Yeah.
Career transition into a PhD is not that difficult. You come in with a very good work ethic, being a professional scenario. You come in with a lot of skills you might not have as a student who is jumping into a PhD. The academic part comes pretty easily. You get the independence you crave from a job at work. You don't have to answer to a supervisor, and that's really helpful. You can work with them, which is really nice. Yeah. I think you yourself have done that.
I was going to add. I mean, I'm 30. I've got a baby, so I'm very much doing other things, and just started my PhD about 18 months ago. I mean, I think the question being, is it feasible/common? I don't know how common it is as such. I mean, I think a lot of people there's a few people I'm surrounded by who have come from other careers, which is really amazing. But it is a lot of people that have come from doing, they're in their early 20s. Is it feasible? Yes. I think it obviously depends on whether you end up getting funding, whether you're self-funded, what kind of program you end up on, and there's lots of different resources out there to find the right way of making that feasible for you, depending on your lifestyle. For me, I freelance alongside doing full-time PhD, so I have 2 full-time jobs, and that's how it's feasible for me. But everybody has to make their own way of doing it, I would say. But I think the answer is yes. It's obviously just making it specific to you, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tailoring your PhD to fit you is really important, not tailoring yourself to fit the PhD.
Yes.
So that's a good way to put it, I think.
I would agree. Anything you guys want to add in on this point about mid-career professionals, or should we go on to the next question?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Making sure we're covering everything. You're already getting loads of questions. This is brilliant. This is a nice one, actually, talking about multidisciplinary, you mentioned earlier on, Andrea. Rick asks, any further advice on weaving together different research fields and breaking down academic silos?
Right, well, I love that question. Thank you for choosing that one. I think what I found really helpful was starting from the get-go. I did a dual undergrad degree, so there was philosophy and psychology. And I found that it's like speaking multiple languages. Knowing how to speak multiple languages won't detract from your ability to speak any single one of them, but it can add insight into the others. And I think learning where people stop being able to talk to each other and making that conversation happen, I think that's perhaps the most important aspect. Once you can get a neuroscientist and a mathematician talking, a lot of interesting stuff can happen, but you have to be able to get them into the same room and talking the same language. So if you are someone who can do that, then that's super valuable, even if you don't have deep knowledge into either of those two things. That is knowledge that you can acquire, and ultimately the collaboration will thrive because of that.
And what would be your advice then in terms of how to, is it about putting yourself in those rooms? Is it about learning how to speak other languages? What would be your advice for people wanting to do
What I found very helpful was figuring out who knows a bit more than I do. Who knows the neuroscience, who can take me from where I am to where I need to be. And that's the same advice that I was giving before for figuring out which PhD to go for and which advisor. But this can mean just a friend or a collaborator who maybe has come from a similar background, but now is a bit further advanced in their career, and maybe they have these complementary skills, like they know more math. For me, someone who knows more math than I do. I'm not a native speaker of math, but some people are. And so long as they know some neuroscience, then we can talk. And then I can learn more math from them. And then I can make sure that they can talk to the right people on the other end of the spectrum, like the philosophers, and making that happen.
Any advice from yourself, Ingrid, when you're thinking about this multidisciplinary and breaking down silos?
I think if you're particularly interested in that, and now I'm speaking not from Project Access experience, even though there as well we do a lot of mentorship across disciplines, so we can pair you with one that is doing exactly what you want to do, but often we find it actually more useful to have a mentor within sort of a bigger bucket of I guess disciplines, and then you can rather find out together what the perfect course is. From my own experience, I think if you're interested in multidisciplinary, I think it's very interesting to also then choose a department that has scholars or professors from various backgrounds. So I'm at Oxford personally now at the Department of Geography and Environment, and you have physicists, you have geography, you have human dimensions people from sociology background, people from econ background, and that is very, very interesting to have both conversations, but also being taught by those type of professors or that type of department, because everything is just embedded in each other. Yeah.
Anything you want to add on that point, Deb? Have we covered everything?
They covered perfectly. Don't look down. Don't be afraid to look down and learn, and be prepared to learn. Like, be ready to do the hard work, and it'll work.
Yeah, 100%. It is about learning languages, right? This is a nice question, which, again, we've all sort of touched on this idea of collaboration in various different ways. Obed asks, when you talk about collaboration, how do you get to collaborate during your own individual project? So what does it actually look like? Dev, you want to say something?
So usually it starts off with where you're working, who you surround yourself with. Those are the first points of collaboration. But then as you grow into your PhD, you will have chances to actually meet people in conferences, and like you should jump on those opportunities. If you have a small connection you can keep in touch and see what you can do in this online world, make those connections. From my own experience at Effective Thesis, we run a community platform, and that's where we just hope that people just make connections in similar interests and like collaborate together there. Sometimes it's, create a WhatsApp group, and that's enough to like talk and do things, and I think that's really helpful usually. And the other thing that comes with collaborations is also having a support system for your PhD, like being prepared from a mental perspective to have that support system. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Anything you want to add on collaboration, Andrea?
I want to echo what Dev said about the support system. I think ultimately there is no perfect mentor who fits every possible requirement that a mentor. That is just not realistic. So having peer mentors and another set of maybe more senior people that you can rely on to fulfill parts of that job, I think that's really valuable. And I would say in terms of finding collaborations, I think I found that there's been two routes that have worked for me. One is finding people who inspire you, who do research that you find really fascinating, and then sometimes just reaching out to them and saying, I like your research, can we talk? And people will like a well-written and thoughtful email. And the other one is making your research accessible to others. Often we are encouraged implicitly to speak the lingo of a particular discipline, and if we can push back on that a little bit and just make the research as accessible to people as possible, then there's that off chance that someone from another field will find that research accessible enough to spark their interest, and then they will be the ones reaching out to you. Yeah. And I think both of those can work really nicely.
I think something I would also add as well that I think has certainly been part of my discussions with various different other PhD students is, you're allowed to go and do stuff. You don't have to wait for permission to send an email to someone or to go to a conference or to whatever, or, go to a meetup that you think is interesting or whatever. I think sometimes, particularly with, more top programs or whatever, you're kind of waiting to be told to do particular things or waiting on assignment. Whereas when you're doing a PhD, it's kind of just your job. Yeah. So if you want to go to an evening meetup or you want to go talk to someone, you can just do it. Like, your supervisor doesn't have to sign off, sort of thing.
When I coach students, like the most common phrase I always tell them or like advise them is like, don't reject yourself. It's not your job. Let the other person, whoever you're emailing, whatever job, whatever opportunity, whatever conference, whatever abstract you want to submit, let them do the rejection. And if you get rejected, you have to deal with it, but it's better than dealing with self-rejection. So never like, do another person's job. You do too much yourself already.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. That's great advice. We've got another nice question here, which I'm thinking Ingrid, you might be the best person to go to first on this one. This is from Matthew. Are part-time PhDs a good idea? Is it difficult to maintain drive or interest over the extended time frame? I wondered if that was something that's maybe come up for some of the people you've worked with.
Yeah, I think so. Not necessarily that much about part-time PhD, so maybe these guys can actually mention or talk about that. But I do think it's important that you come in. The people we mentor, many of our students. So we at Project Access, we help disadvantaged students from across the world get into leading universities, and by that it also sometimes is financial constraints that might come in. So there are both in undergrad, postgrad, and then obviously both masters and PhDs, there are considerations about if you can get enough funding to actually do full-time, and that is something that we always make sure that if that is a conversation that you have to have with the university, then we try to help with this. How common or good it is, I don't know in the sense of traction of interest, then I think these guys are better, but yeah.
Would you like to talk on that, Andrea?
There's one big advantage of a part-time PhD that I had no idea about before starting, and that's the fact that it takes longer, means you have more time to get your papers published, which especially in the sciences is really important, but sometimes that can take a really long time. Yeah. So especially in the UK where a PhD is relatively short, 3-4 years, some of your papers won't be coming out. That would be if you were doing a part-time PhD. Now, of course, that shouldn't be the main consideration, but it is one consideration that I think is underappreciated before starting.
Well, and going back to that point around what's this long-term impact you're trying to have, like you do have to think about more than just when do I want to finish this PhD. It's like, what are you ultimately trying to build? What kind of scientist or what kind of social scientist or whatever it is do you want to be, and what does that look like? Do you have anything to add on this part-time?
Yeah, actually, setting expectations is even more important in a part-time PhD than a full-time PhD. You have to set expectations with your supervisor, not that you're overworking in a part-time PhD, but also setting expectations with your part-time work. Because now you have two places where you might just overwork yourself. So make sure you set the right expectations so you can find that right balance, I think.
Definitely. And something I'll maybe just add as well, because I'm actually considering changing from full-time to part-time because I've now got a child. But this question around maintaining drive and interest over an extended time frame, I mean, arguably 4 years is a long time anyway. So, I mean, I think that's certainly, for me, in some sense, I'm kind of excited about having more time to some degree because, when I first started my PhD, I thought, 4 years, how am I going to care about this one topic for 4 years? And actually, 18 months in, I'm like, this is no time at all. Maybe I should go part-time and I can have a bit more, extended time to think about it, but not overwork, as you say. So it's probably dependent on your own personality, how easily you, maintain interest and drive, regardless if it's full-time or part-time. But lots of really nice points coming up. What else have we got here? We've got lots of comments. Let me just make sure I'm not asking the same thing. Harriet says, don't reject yourself, such sound advice. So there you go, you're really getting that.
Thank you, Harriet.
And, and Obed has said that as well. I love that too. Do your job by emailing and allow them to do their own, except to reject you. Thank you for that. Here's a nice question. It's actually just come in from Anonymous. Any tips for time/project management in PhD when there's a lot to learn, but the learning is not as structured in a top course? I think that's probably the core question, isn't it? Dev, when you go.
I think we were talking about this earlier too. Find the right balance on how you do work. So I experimented with calendar blocking. It didn't work for me, but I had to find a way to set schedules, set expectations, and really find what works for you. And if the first few months is just experimenting and testing that out, that's okay. But every time you have a couple of months, you reflect and you think, that didn't work, let me change that. Don't wait for a year to pass and say, oh, how did that work? So constant reflection is pretty good to adapt.
What about yourself, Andrea? What do you think on the project management?
I feel like seconding what Dev just said, which is, part of learning how to fail is also learning how you fail best. And, sometimes failing quickly is the best thing. And sometimes doing something really as thoroughly as you can and then seeing if that still fails, that can also work out. But you have to constantly work on two levels, figuring out the science, but also figure out how you do the science and what the best way for you to do the science. Those two things, or talking about the science PhD, of course, but I suspect it might translate well to other kinds as well. You have to figure out both at the same time. That's just the way it is.
I can imagine this must come up for a lot of the students as well when you're mentoring, as just how to manage them.
And I think we've had a lot of, we might come to that later, I guess, on stress management and burnout. And I think this question a little bit reflects that, like, how do you actually manage your time and ensure that you don't get stressed? And I think a lot of it is around expectations for yourself or making it accepting that you will fail, or I think a brilliant one is that if you create a list with lots of to-dos, which many of us do, be extremely happy if you manage to do 2 of them. 2 out of 10. Yes, fantastic. And then you start reflecting on what you have done rather versus what you haven't done. And I think we talked about like sort of smaller to-dos versus bigger to-dos and how you sort of always try to prioritize those quick wins.
Yeah.
But in one way I feel, and what we do a lot with our mentees, is exactly like set the deadline or set this sort of timeline, try to manage your time in a bigger perspective, and then remind themselves of the successes that they've had versus the non-successes then and the failures, because their successes are many if you count them. And I think that's even more relevant in a PhD where you're so sort of swimming in the darkness sometimes, and you need to remind yourself what you actually have done in the last 2 months.
I think what I would add to that, I haven't yet wrote my thesis, but I wrote a book, so it's kind of which is the same length with thesis. And my advice to anyone who's doing any kind of big writing project is get your deadline work backwards and then double the amount of time that you've worked backwards, because it always takes way longer, whether it's because you need a bit of time off to manage your stress or whether it's just because you want to make it better or whatever. The other thing I would say is also explore. There's a lot of brilliant online tools, you know. Anyone who uses Zotero, quick plug, they've got their new iOS app. How exciting, just downloaded it yesterday. But yeah, there's lots of really great, I think, online tools and whatnot that can accelerate and help. I mean, God, reference as you go, for goodness sake. Do not leave it to the last minute would be one of my biggest tips. But just small things to try and not leave to the end. Anything else you want to add on time management? You look like you want to say something, Dan.
Two things. So the online tools, so important. We collect a lot of online tools on like our website. So like some of them off the top of my head, Elicit is an AI research assistant that's really helpful. Connectedpapers.com,
Oh my God,
so useful
so
for
good.
literature reviews. Just off the top of my head, so many of these tools. And
Rome Research.
yeah,
Oh
Rome
my
Research or
goodness.
Obsidian is such a good one. Or Notion, I live on Notion. And the other thing on to-do list, I'm someone who like suffered from burnout. I suffer from burnout all the time, and what I'm doing to like sort of fight that myself is I add having fun onto my to-do list. So like if I like movies, I put like I'm watching this movie today or I'm reading this book today. Like this is my productivity. It's to give myself time to relax. It's important. And that's how I'm avoiding it for now.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I just want to shout on Notion. I think Notion
Oh,
is
Notion.
absolutely
Amazing.
fantastic.
I'm more of a Rome kind of gal, but I do like Notion quite a bit. Loads of questions coming in, so I'm just going to stick here for a little bit longer. We've got a nice question, which I'll go to you, Andrea, because it looks like you're in a similar sort of stage, from Madeline. Is there any advice for those PhD students coming up to / in their final year in terms of completing your thesis and figuring out what's next?
Right. Well, the figuring out part, I'd say start at least a year in advance. And that's because if you're interested in postdocs at least, many of the fellowship opportunities will be advertised about a year in advance. You need to be really proactive with that, with where you look and with the when you look. And I would say if that is something that you can afford, then look broadly. Don't just geographically limit yourself, unless you have to, in which case that's fine too, because that's part of making the PhD and the science job in your life. In terms of the writing up, I can only really emphasize the figuring out when things need to get done and then give yourself a lot more time than you think you need, because it's true that tasks stretch to occupy the time that you give them, but they're not that elastic in the other direction. If you give them too little time, you just won't be able to do it, no matter how much coffee you drink. There is actually an upper limit of hours that you have in the day, and you do need the sleep. So all of those things do compound each other. Give yourself plenty of time.
I think there's also a big difference between like writing an essay, a couple of thousand words, over a course of a day or two at last minute versus writing 100,000 words over. You know, like you can't just stay up the entire time writing 100,000 words. It's not as well. Maybe some people can, but those people are special, shall we say? Liz, any more thoughts on this final year point and figuring?
Where you look is really an important tool. I think one place that I find a lot of opportunities, surprisingly, is Twitter. I follow a lot of academics and use it mainly for like academic Twitter. And it's really helpful to find all of these fellowships retweeted like very fast, and you just follow it. It's a good way to just be up to date, so you know what's happening. Yeah.
Speaking of Twitter, someone's actually said, can you drop Twitter handles, please? I don't know if that's possible to put in the chat. One of our assistants, maybe. I'm not sure. Or you can search us. Maybe that's part of research, right? I don't know if it might be in the information next to our names on the in your Hopin platform or something like that. But if you just search our names, I'm sure. Are we all on? I'm on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter.
You're on Twitter. You're not on Twitter. Okay.
You
live on Twitter. Oh, you'll find the three of us on Twitter. And actually, someone else has said it would be great to get a list of the tools mentioned. I'll start a thread with the three of us in it, and we'll do that after our session. And if you come follow us, you can get the tools. Do you want to say something, Deb?
Our website at Effective Thesis, we have it all listed out. Just see our resources page, and it should be there.
There we go. Well, we'll put that in the thread for anyone who wants to come join us on there. Another question that's come in from Daniela. Are there any tips on how to optimise the process of signing off PhD dissertation chapters? How to avoid lots of toing and froing? But it depends on your supervisor to some degree.
Yeah.
Andrea, we were talking about this earlier. Go for it.
Something that I found really helpful is thinking of writing papers, and that might be applied more to the sciences, I'm aware, than some of the humanities, but writing papers rather than writing chapters. And starting from the get-go, you do some research. As soon as that piece of research is completed, you package it up as a paper, start trying to get it published, because that will take time. And at the end of the day, when you start having to write your thesis, then you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from, you have papers that you can turn into your chapters. And I think for me, it helps a lot knowing that I'm not starting from a blank slate, but that I am building up on that. That's probably the best piece of advice that I can give on this.
Any advice as well from this idea of writing up and trying to get good, not having to go to and fro too many times to your supervisor?
No, so Project Access, we don't, and I think this is what we started collaborating before our call today, or before the panel today, is like just, we support before application and during application and preparing to start, and you help during. So that's why Dev is a lot better.
Pass on to Dev then.
Similar to what Andrea said, it's really important. Having more feedback loops are better than having less. So, applying to a journal, even if you get rejected, you've gotten a feedback loop that improves your paper. Applying to conferences where you just speak about the paper before you write it out is also a really good feedback loop, because you have many people asking questions. And just connecting or emailing other experts who might be willing to have a look at it, or could be your coworkers that might just add something really unique from a different language, like you said. Yeah.
I would also add, writing as you go. It doesn't have to make sense, even if you're just writing bullet points in your Notion or your Roam or whatever, or even if it's in your lab book. But just so that the thoughts that you're having as you're thinking are there, they're maybe going to be great for discussion, maybe they're good for the intro. It doesn't matter if they don't make sense, but at least so that you're not starting from a complete blank slate when it comes to writing this chapter. You've got something to pull on. I certainly find that useful myself.
I have an idea page on Notion. I just put any random idea.
Notion. We should be getting some what is it? If people are signing up, we should get credit or something. Advertising
commissions.
This is a really important question, and I hear this a lot from a lot of PhD students. So let's focus on this a little bit. Would you have any advice for dealing with a group that have no postdocs? My supervisor is a very busy man. I sometimes feel I'm lacking support. I think this is very common, depending on what lab you're in or what kind of department you're in. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to either get support or not feel so alone in a PhD. We'll start with you, Dev.
Yeah, having a support system is so important. So if you don't have one in your lab, and that's really unfortunate, but there's ways around it. Like we said earlier, reach out to people who might be looking. There might be postdocs who are willing to collaborate from other labs. At Effective Thesis, we sort of connect experts from different areas together for one of these reasons, and try to go into your PhD looking for a support system that's not just your lab, because that's really useful just to be prepared. You're going to need mental health support and not just applications and writing support as well. So just everything that can work in that sense. Andrea might have something better to add now. Yeah.
So I think it connects to what I was saying earlier about the importance of finding people who are a little bit further ahead of you. And that doesn't have to be in your lab. My own lab does not have postdocs. We have quite a lot of senior PhD students. And I found that some of my best collaborators are in the lab, and some of the others are not. They are in other labs, and sometimes in other universities, sometimes in other countries, and still we can make use of the tools of today for connecting very easily with other people. And all of that started from emails, from me saying, I like your research, can we talk? And then this person said, I'm actually moving university and starting my postdoc. That's how it happened. So you can, I think we've all been saying in different ways, being proactive is really important. And I think this is one of those cases. Create your own network. Don't expect it to be already there, perfectly made for you. Find what you need and then reach out to people to make that network happen. And a good supervisor and a good advisor is someone who will facilitate that or understand that you need that and be at least supportive of that, if not actively making it for you.
I think one thing I would add as well is that I feel that there's actually a lot of brilliant resources and groups, whether it's being formed out of conferences, or even, the Alan Turing Institute is a perfect example. They have lots of different groups for different kinds of, people in research. But I do feel that sometimes it's not advertised very well. You have to almost seek it out. I sometimes am surprised. I'll come across a conference. I'm like, oh, how did I not know that existed? That's literally perfect for my research. So I think it's not just proactive in terms of reaching out to people, Googling, getting yourself on listservs. It's annoying getting loads of emails, but at the end of the day, that's where the opportunities are advertised. You know, Twitter. You mentioned Twitter. It's
also RSS feeds.
yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, loads. My inbox is so full, but at the end of the day, that is where you find the good stuff. We've got another couple of questions before we've got about 5 minutes left, so let me just see if I can get through them. One just popped in that I've lost because it moved. Sorry, that was quite nice. It's completely gone, so let's... Ooh, there we go. From Wajahat. How do you manage the resources which may have been shelved for years and then go back to retrieve them for your lit review? So I guess this is a little bit about management of... well, I mean, literature, really. How do you guys think about managing different resources and thinking about pulling on them when it comes to compiling? Go to you first, Andrea.
I find sometimes it's helpful if you've written pieces of papers in the past, for instance, then you had to write an introduction, and sometimes you can pull from those and pull them together. I also have Excel spreadsheets that I use for tracking papers. So every paper that I read that's somewhat relevant to my research, I'll just write a quick summary that is tailored to what I expect my interest will be, and then have all of that there, and I can look back to it. And I'm sure that there's tools for doing that smarter, but that's what works for me.
It's whatever works for you, isn't it? There's a million different tools.
It really is.
Yeah, even if it's just handwritten. What about yourself, Dev?
I mean, I started doing that this year on Notion because you can add tags, and so I like the tags. But sometimes during my lazier years, I guess, I would just make a note of the key literature review papers that, like, every sort of discipline has a review publication. I just make a note of those ones that I go back and look at and see, okay, what are they talking about there? And then, like, that helps a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's notes management is, I think, probably the main thing, isn't it, when you're doing a PhD? It's just how do you find your own notes, never mind everyone else's. Anything you want to add here on this point?
No, let's continue with Notion, because I do think that the brilliant thing about, and you can use Excel sheets, I've done that before as well, and I know a lot of people have documents by document summarizing, but the brilliant thing with Notion is that you can connect it back with tags and create new tables, and it's super integrative process. So you can tag a lot of articles into different sections, or for example, a big PhD in different paper or chapters that you want to write. So I think that's one of the pages or tools, and tools are really good there, of course. So I would just recommend going to Effective Thesis.
Yeah, getting your list of resources. I would say the same on Rome, same on Obsidian, Zotero. You can tag papers really easily on all of these tools. We've only got about 2 minutes left, so I want to go back. There was a question that was asked earlier that I thought was lovely that I wanted to leave to the end from Robert. Sorry, Robert, you've probably been waiting on me to ask this question for ages. Have you heard of What 3 Words, the mapping tool? I'm not sure. It's like every location, instead of it being like coordinates, they give you 3 words like plant, lamp, street, or something like that. And Robert says, if you were to locate the PhD student experience in 3 words, what 3 words would you say? What a lovely question. You're all looking like flummoxed, having to think of this brilliant answer, but I'm going to go to you, Dev, because you look the most. Yeah, because you look the most flummoxed.
Oh, wow.
So 3 words to summarise the PhD student experience.
Adventure.
Okay.
Adventure. They're all positive. That's surprising. Adventure, fun, and learning.
Love it. Okay, let's go to yourself, Ingrid.
Okay, I'll do a little bit more broader for postgrad. I think diverse, challenging, and I guess I'll do learning as well, because I think learning is one of the core elements. Yeah.
Love it. Andrea.
I'd probably go for synergy, because that word is on my mind a lot. Independence and growth.
Synergy, independence, and growth. I've actually been thinking of my answer while you were speaking. I'm going to do mind bending. It's got a hyphen, so it counts as one word. Because I think that's what it does to you. I think challenging, but in a good way. And writing. I'm going to put it as a third one, because I think sometimes that is an underspoken about point when we think about research.
I have another word, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Roller coaster.
Roller coaster. Okay, let's end on that. I think that's a really good point. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this session. Hopefully you've got some good advice. As I say, I'll set up a little Twitter thread so we're all connected. on my Twitter if anyone wants to come and follow along. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining, being so candid about your experiences and sharing so much advice. Hopefully everybody who's been tuning in has got some stuff to take away. And as I say, come join us on Twitter if you want to keep chatting afterwards.